Go. Thank you for joining for our last ENP study session. Yes, you can see that on the screen. So this is the review and test preparation session. There's not going to be a whole lot to this session. I'm going to go through and recap the topics that were covered in each of the previous sessions. I'm not going to go into detail on all of them. It's just to refresh your memory about the topic existing. And the idea is that if you have a question about any particular topic, or you would like me to re-explain anything that was talked about in a previous session, you can interrupt me and ask me those questions. And then at the end, we're going to talk a little bit about the test itself, what all it will include, and some tips for preparing for the test. So with that, as usual, I want to give credit where credit is due. This ENP study session is brought to you by the Colorado 911 Resource Center and the Colorado 911 Training Standards Institute and the Colorado 911 program. So thank you to those three organizations and entities for sponsoring, or sponsoring isn't the right word because no money was involved, but for hosting this event. So we will be doing a material review. Then we're going to talk about eligibility requirements. There's certain things you have to do before you're even allowed to take the test. We're going to talk about the breakdown of the test because it is broken into sections with a certain number of questions on a variety of topic areas. We're going to talk about what a passing score is. Then we're going to talk about recertification requirements, because you shouldn't take a certification that costs money and then find out by surprise later that you have to do a certain number of things to keep that certification fresh. So we're going to talk about what the recertification requirements are, and then we will close. So to get started, the first thing we talked about in our sessions was an introduction to the PSAP. This included three sections from your study guide. Section 2.8, which was overview of an E911 PSAP. 2.6, which was types and features of 911 systems, and 2.7, which is other PSAP equipment. Did anybody have any questions about overview of PSAPs? And I think most of the people who've been taking our sessions, if not everybody who's been taking our sessions, is actually from a PSAP, so this may be unnecessary, but if anybody would like to ask any questions regarding those sections, we'd do our best to try to answer them. Okay. PSAP external systems. We have 2.1, which was radio communication, 2.2 mobile radios, 2.3 was mobile versus portable radios, 2.14, which was FirstNet and public safety broadband, and then 4.7, which was loss of a trunked radio system. You'll notice these section numbers are all over the place. It's because the book doesn't actually do a very good job of consolidating these sections by topic. So we tried to do that for them when we were arranging these sessions. As you can tell, this is mostly to do with radio, but also a little bit to do with FirstNet and public safety broadband. Does anybody have any questions that they would like to, or any information they would like some refresher on regarding those sections? Okay.
Daryl, would you mind touching on the loss of a trunked radio system? I feel like we've had some radio outages in the past year, and I just kind of wanted to touch on that a little bit.
Sure, and I think Jennifer taught this session. Is that right, Jennifer?
Yep, that's right.
So do you want to talk about that at all?
Sure. I'm going to go to that section, but while I am, is there something specific you had a question about?
I don't. I just kind of wanted a little bit of a review just so I have it fresh in my mind again. And I'm looking at the page in the study guide too.
Cool. Okay. So in a trunked system, if a radio site, if you think about all those different radio sites and they're all connected to something called a zone controller. In the book, it's called a network core. So if those radio sites lose connection with the network core or the zone controller, then basically that radio tower goes into a mode where it functions more like a walkie-talkie, right? So anybody who is affiliated, like any of those radios out there, cops, firefighters, EMTs, whatever, that were affiliated with that site when it went down, when it lost connection, they can still talk to each other because it's still like functioning as a go-between for those radios. But anybody who wasn't attached to that site when it lost connection cannot communicate with those users that are still affiliated with that site. So sometimes you might hear radio text say, you need to turn your radio off and back on. And what that's doing is trying to make it affiliate with a different site that maybe isn't affected. So that's called site trunking. Does that make sense so far?
Yes. And would that be kind of like you're saying the field units can talk to each other, but they're not able to talk to dispatch when that happens?
Yeah, typically, yes, because
Okay.
if that radio site isn't connected to the zone controller, which could then connects to the dispatch center.
Got it.
Yep.
Okay.
So then you want those radios to affiliate to a different site. Now, depending on how dispersed those radio sites are, that might not be possible. And so now you've got field users out there that are stranded. They can't talk to you via the radio, and you as dispatch can't talk to them.
Mm-hmm. And so you're saying if they connect to a nearby radio tower, not the one that's down, they should be able to connect to dispatch again.
Correct.
Okay. Awesome. Yep. Thank you. I feel like radios are definitely a part of the job that are a little elusive for me. We have one tech that's just an expert, and he starts talking and I have trouble paying attention because I just don't quite understand it, but I'm getting there. I'm working on it.
No problem. I totally get it. And those radio techs sure know how to go into jargon mode and lose you pretty easy. So I'm lucky I have my own resident radio tech to explain it to me. And I have made it explain it to me over and over again until I finally got it. So offline, if you want to have a conversation, just feel free to call me and I'd be happy to answer all your questions as best I can anytime.
Yeah, I appreciate that, Jennifer. Thank you.
No problem.
And Jennifer, adding on to that, so what you described was basically one site losing its connection to the digital trunk radio system.
Right.
If a whole trunk radio system goes down, so you can think of the trunk radio system as working like there are multiple channels and there are different talk groups, and you stay on one talk group, but the talk group is going to use a different channel every time you key up, depending on which channel is free, right?
Yep, you got it.
That's what the digital trunked part does. It's finding the right channel to use for that talk group. If the digital trunked radio part, if the digital trunked part goes down, so there's no longer any control, then the channels still exist. It's just the talk groups that don't work anymore. And so I think Jennifer's worked in a PSAP a lot more recently than I have. So Jennifer, tell me if I'm wrong on this, but because the channels are still there, you can still use it. It's just not working the way it normally would with the talk groups. Is that right?
Kind of, yes. You described it well. And I think you're also looking maybe at the book where it says fail-soft mode, where it would function as a conventional radio repeater. Right. Yep, you got it exactly right.
Yeah, I don't have the book in front of me, but that's what I remember.
It's because I stole it.
That's right. You have the book.
The one book that the PUC could buy. But yes, that's right. That's fail mode.
We're like, when I was growing up, we had one spoon in the house. We had to take turns eating.
Wow.
Yeah. Anyway, any other questions about radios or FirstNet? That
was a great question.
It was.
I don't have a question, but I have a resource coming up with Amanda Terwilliger with the SWIC.
Mm-hmm.
Has Radio 101 classes. I sent that out a few days ago to everybody coming to your area.
Great. Do you know if that class will also cover digital trunk radio? Probably.
Yes. Proper use, radio etiquette, operability, interoperability, MAC usage and misusage, frequency band, talk group, dragging, and more.
Very cool. So yeah, I would recommend that for you, Candace, if you're a little shaky on the radio stuff like the rest of us, that would probably be a good class to take before the exam.
Yeah, I'll look for that. Connie, did you send it to this group?
Well, I sent it to the Colorado group, but I will send it to you specifically, Candace.
That would be awesome. Thank you.
You bet.
Cool. Then we talked about 911 networks. We talked about E911 network design and architecture. We talked about network configuration, which really was talking about the telecom network configuration for basically your local landline service, but that's also the network that 911 rides over to get to the PSAP. Then we talked about next generation 911 and migration to next generation 911, super briefly, because you could spend an entire week on those two topics at least, but it was all done in one session. Does anybody have any questions or have anything in particular that we went over in that session that you would like me to go over in more detail or recap? Okay. Next, we talked about 911 reliability and contingency planning. I think this was one of Michael's sessions. Survivability and reliability of legacy 911, contingency and disaster planning, hazards analysis, categories of service interruption, telecommunicator emergency response task force or TERT, and evacuation of a PSAP. Does anybody have any questions about any of these topics or anything we went over in that session that you would like us to recap? Okay. Classes of service, and I explained in that session that classes of service may not have been the best title for that topic. It was more about all of the different ways that 911 calls can get to the 911 network and ultimately to the PSAP. So we talked about VoIP services, commercial mobile radio services, or CMRS, which is just another word for wireless 911, MLTS, E911 interconnection, and then there's a separate section. So we have 2.4.7, which is about CMRS, which is wireless telecommunications. And then we have another section about wireless cellular 911. So they cover slightly different things, but they're both about wireless telecommunications. Text to 911, real-time text, and over-the-top additional data delivery. And if you're unclear about the difference between text to 911 or real-time text, that would be a good thing to ask now, and I can talk to you about those. But other than that, if anybody has any questions for me on any of these topics, I'd be happy to try to answer them.
Daryl, would you remind me the real-time text? That's when you could kind of see the dots like somebody's typing a text message. Is that right?
Yep. So real-time text was essentially a new technology that was created to replace TTY for wireless devices. So it works a lot like a TTY. So with a TTY, you know, as they're typing, you can see each letter appear on your screen. That's what real-time text does. Another big difference is with text to 911, you know, they send the text, it shows up on your screen, and that's it. There's no constant connection between you and the caller. With real-time text, the line is open just like a phone call, and you can also hear background noise on the call. So you can hear what's happening on the other end of the call. So it works a lot more like a TTY, but it's a TTY service that is specifically made for wireless devices.
Got it. Thank you.
Yep. Any other questions? Okay. NINA standards, there were only 2 sections in this, but there's a lot of standards, so it took a whole session to talk about these 2 sections. So there's NINA standards and high-level ANSI description. Basically, that was just describing what ANSI is and what ANSI does. For bonus points, can anybody tell me what ANSI stands for? I was hoping somebody would know, so I wouldn't. Okay, there now. I had it right. American National Standards Institute. And then I started second guessing myself because why would it say American and National? But it does. It's the American National Standards Institute. And they're an organization that helps develop and oversee processes for developing standards. And NINA and other organizations in the telecom space are ANSI accredited, which means that their standards development processes meet the ANSI requirements. Does anybody have any questions about these two items? Or about any NINA standard that was talked about during that session? Okay.
Yes, Daryl, can you please go into specific detail the I3 standard and everything it covers?
Sure.
No, please don't.
That will take more than the hour and a half that we have, but we could do that.
I'm good, thanks.
Actually, there is a class coming up if you are interested. It was just announced. It's going to be in April at AdCom. See if I can find that real quick.
Demystifying Next Generation 911.
Yes, and our very own Jennifer here had a hand in developing that class. It's going to be April 23rd and 24th, so it's 2 days, which is why I can't go through all of it right now. But it's going to be at AdCom. It does cost a little bit, so for NINA members it's $335, and for non-members it's $455. This would be a really good class for someone to take prior to taking the ENP exam, because it really will help you understand all of the different pieces and parts of what Next Generation 911 is and how it works.
Mike Braden was really upset with me because I scheduled our in-service on the 24th, so he can't go to that now.
Oh, can you reschedule your in-service?
No.
Oh, okay. Well, I do think it would be a good class to take if you're getting ready for your ENP exam, or if you just want a refresher, because I know about all the different parts of Next Generation 911, but because I'm not an engineer, it kind of slips out of my head. So I got to take refreshers every few years to keep it stuck in my frontal lobe. Then we talked about 911 databases. We talked about E911 database terms. We talked about the E911 relational database scheme. We talked about the National Information Exchange model, E911 record creation, database development, implementation, and maintenance, anti-alley reporting and investigation reference notes, and preparing for Next Generation 911 data management. And I'm pretty weak on some of this stuff, but I know Jennifer actually taught this session. So if anybody has any questions, we do have the expert here. Okay. Next, we have location and GIS technology. We have geographic information systems, location determination technologies, GPS and other satellite location systems, mobile-based location applications, and GPS-based telematics services. And I'm fairly decent on this stuff, so if anybody has any questions, I can try to answer that. An interesting point of fact, the FCC later this month is going to be discussing what comes after GPS, because that system has been up in the sky for decades now, and those satellites are going to start coming down. So they're talking about what's going to replace GPS, which is a pretty interesting topic in my opinion. Okay. Next we have 911 administration, including management functions, public relations and education, development of policies and procedures. And then we had 911 human resources, including management of employees, selection and placement, pre-employment inquiry guidelines, compensation and benefits, employee relations, and labor relations. And 911 administration human resources continued. So there was more to talk about on that topic. So we created a separate session to talk about health and safety, scheduling employee time, every 911 center manager's favorite thing to do, trying to schedule everybody. quality and performance management, and training and development. And U.S. employment law, there was USA legislation to review, just one section of the book, but there's a lot of stuff to talk about in that section. Did anybody have any questions about any of the pieces of legislation that were talked about? I believe Michael taught that session, but I may be wrong. Okay. And then I taught this session. It was USA Federal 911 legislation and FCC regulation. Again, just two sections, but there was a lot packed into those two sections. Talked about all of the 911 bills over the years with a little bit of a history about the monopoly, the AT&T monopoly, and the breakup of AT&T and deregulation, because all of that is relevant to 911. And then we talked about FCC rules in broad topic areas. So we talked about rules related to wireless 911 location, multi-line telephone services, text to 911, and I think we talked about the most recent one, which was the phase 1 and phase 2 for next generation 911 deployment for originating service providers. Does anybody have any questions on these two topics or any of the topics within them? Okay. Well, those were all the things we talked about up to this point. So that's like 3 months, something like that, of sessions summarized in 24 minutes. So we'll talk about the test itself. So before you're even allowed to take the test, you have to meet certain eligibility requirements. First, you have to have one of these two things on the left side of the screen. That's 3 years of experience in emergency communications, or 3 years of experience with a commercial provider of emergency communications products and services. So the ENP isn't just for people who work in PSAPs. The ENP is also for anybody who works in the industry. That could be somebody who works at a telecommunications company that provides 911 network services, or it could be a company that provides call handling equipment. So you'll see ENPs all throughout the 911 industry. So if you didn't have 3 years of experience in a 911 center itself, you could also have 3 years of experience or some combination of the two. I think you can do a combination of the two. So you can also work in the private sector. Once you have that, you also have to have 10 points of things on the right-hand side of the screen. So you can have 2 years, you get 2 years of experience for each year of experience over 3 years. So again, on the left-hand side, you have to have at least 3 years of experience. But if you've got 5 years of experience, then you've got 4 points. So there's 2 years above the 3 years that you can put towards your 10 points. So you've got 4 points right there if you've got 5 years of experience. If you have a college degree, and it doesn't even matter what kind of college degree, that counts towards your points as well. So your highest college degree counts towards your points. 6 points for a graduate degree, 4 points for a bachelor's, or 2 points for an associate degree. NINA courses completed. If you can document any NINA courses you've completed up to this point, you get 1 point for each NINA course that you have completed, up to a maximum of 4 points. Holding out office at the chapter or national level counts for 1 point. And if you have a CMCP certification, that is 5 points. And any other professional certifications, and there's a list of them in the application for taking the ENP exam, each one of those certifications can count for 1 point each. Or no, excuse me, you get 1 point max if you have any other professional certifications. You can't count each one as a separate point. So you can see it's not too difficult to get to 10 points, but if you don't have 10 points yet, you can continue working on working in the call center until you get enough points through the experience, through the 2 points per year experience item, or you can take some NINA courses, or you can look at maybe some other types of certifications, or you can run for a a position with the Colorado NINA APCO chapter, which I highly recommend. Test breakdown, there are 150 questions. I know that sounds really daunting. They are all multiple choice though. And the percentage of questions in each topic, there is a more detailed breakdown of this in the book, but for operations, so half the questions will be about 911 operations, and within that 50%, it breaks down further to telecommunications operations is 35%. What they mean by telecommunications operations, that's like, how do telephones work? How does landline work? What is DTMF? What is, does cellular telecommunications work? Those types of questions that we talked about pretty early on in the sessions. Then information systems. So all of that database stuff that Jennifer went over would be included in that. And then 5% on legislation related to 911 operations. Because we're talking about 911 operations, we're talking about the management law, the HR law. Those are the types of things that you would need to know for that 5%. Then the other half of the questions are about 911 management. Management of organization, 20%. Management of employees, 25%. So you can think about things like the quality assurance section, the section about training and development, about hiring and retention. All of that would be in that 25%. And then legislation, 5%, because we're talking about management, we'd be talking about the 911 legislation, the U.S. legislation that created the 911 system that we have today. And then I want to point out, I didn't list it all here because it's very long, but there in the application form itself, there is a long list of requirements in the application regarding test proctoring standards. Make sure to read those carefully, or you may actually be turned away at the test taking site. Some of the things that were in there: don't wear long baggy sleeves. Why? Because some people might try to keep cheat materials up their sleeve or something. So it's all about making sure that everybody is taking the test with their own knowledge, not bringing any materials in with them. So just make sure you read those requirements and the proctoring standards carefully so that you don't get turned away when you show up at the test site. Passing score. It used to be a set number when I took it, of course, and every time I think about this, I'm like, dang, it can't possibly have been that long ago. But I took the ENP 20 years ago, and it was 70%. You had to get 70% to get a passing score. Today, based on what I read in the application form, it's actually determined by the NINA Institute and may be adjusted based on the questions that are actually in the test. So the passing score you have to get depends on how on the questions that are in the test, and how it works is the NINA Institute actually has a committee that looks at each question and determines how important would it be for someone to know the answer to this question to be a professional in 911. And the more important they think it is, the more likely it is that you have to get that question right in order to pass the test. Jennifer, I think you're on the NINA. You've done a lot with the NINA educational side. Am I describing that correctly on how that works?
As far as I know, although I will say I am not on the NINA Institute board. I'm on the Education Advisory Board, and they keep a pretty good firewall between the two entities.
Okay.
So I think what you've described is correct, but I'm definitely not the expert on that.
That's how it read to me when I was reading the application form to create these slides, and it surprised me because, like I said, when I took the test, it was 70%. As long as you got 70%, you passed. So it's apparently different today. There's not a specific score you have to shoot for. But obviously, the greater the mastery you have of the material, the better your score will be. So, get that study guide, review the study guide. As you're reviewing the study guide, if you have questions, don't hesitate at all to reach out to me or Jennifer or Michael. and we will do our best to try to answer those questions for you. If you don't know the answer, take advantage of the fact that it is a multiple choice test. You can eliminate the answers that you know are wrong. So if you read the answers and you're like, I'm not sure which one of these is right, start thinking to yourself, okay, which of these are obviously wrong? Then you can eliminate those. And if you get down to 2 possible answers, then at least you have a 50-50 chance of getting it right. Recertification requirements. So do know that after you get certified, you do have to recertify every 4 years. Frankly, it is not difficult. Some people I've heard say that they have difficulty getting their points, or they didn't get enough points, so they had to retake the test instead of just sending in their point form. But I've never had difficulty getting enough points. If you are working in a 911 center and going to training occasionally, going to conferences occasionally, you will get your 24 points. It's not that difficult. Examples of activities that count as points towards recertification: attending conferences. Almost all NINA, APCO, and IAED conferences count towards your points for attending conferences. If you earn any additional degrees after being certified, that counts as points. Earning any other professional certifications counts as points. Taking any 911 related courses, holding office in your local NINA chapter, serving on NINA committees, and there are several other categories on the recertification form. So they give you lots of ways to earn points. And again, it's every 4 years, so you only have to earn an average of 6 points a year to get your 24 points. It's really not that difficult. But the key is to document your points regularly. So at least once a month, I go back over my calendar. What did I do this month? Did I attend any NINA courses? Did I attend any non-NINA courses? Because even those count for points. And I write I keep a journal basically of all of the things that I did that I do that count towards points, so that when my recertification is due, all I have to do is fill out the form with all the information that I already have and send it in with my money. And it makes it a lot easier. If you wait until the end of the 4 years and then you start trying to rack your brain, what did I do over the last 4 years that might count towards points, you're going to have a lot harder time filling out that form. Alternatively, you can just retake the test every 4 years. Most people choose not to do that because taking the test is kind of stressful. But you can do that if you don't want to track your points. I'm not sure what the price difference is, because there is a cost for taking the test and there is a cost for recertification. I'm not sure if it costs more to retake the test versus recertifying or not, but that could be something you might want to look into if that's an issue. But it's not that big of a price difference. I think they're both around, they're both in the few $100 ranges.
Can I add to your?
Oh, sorry.
Sorry, Claire, go ahead.
Do you remember, Daryl, is it just like the title of the conference or class and the date? Is that like enough to? Okay.
Yep, that's all you need. It asks for which conference you went to and what the dates were.
Okay, thanks.
And in each of these categories, there's like a max that you can get. So like for conferences, there's a maximum of 8 points. So if you go to as many conferences as I do, you max that out in the first year and a half, and then you can't get any more points for that. But then you start focusing on the other areas. I'm sorry, Jennifer, go ahead.
No, you're good. I was going to also make a couple of other suggestions because I'm terrible at journaling. But I do have a folder where every time I get a certificate or go to class and get continuing education or whatever, I just dump it all in that folder. And when I need it, it's right there. Alternatively, you can download the recertification application off of the NINA website, and it'll tell you all the categories of available points. And I keep it when I had to recertify this year. So after I get my recertification, I will put a blank one on my desktop. And then every time I do something that I think will be points, or every now and then when I'm like, oh, what should I do today? I'll go see how many ENP points I racked up, and I'll just go through the application and fill it in throughout the 4 years, so that when it comes time, I don't have to go back and do a lot of hard brain work.
That is exactly what I do. So here's my ENP form. I've been filling it out for the last 3.5 years, and I have to recertify at the end of this year, or in October, I think, of 2025. Anyway, you can see I filled out all 8 points for the conferences pretty quick. By 2023, I'd already filled out 8 conferences, and that was even with COVID near the beginning of it. If I had earned another degree, I would put that here, and that would be worth 10 whole points right there. Obviously, that's a big undertaking to get another post high school degree, but if that's something that you're doing anyway, you'll get points for it. If you were to get any of these certifications, that would count for 6 points, and you just have to put which certification you got and the date that you achieved it. Any courses that you take, and it kind of breaks it down, you get a half point for every NINA webinar you attend. You get a half point for courses that are 4 hours or less. You get 1 point for courses that are 5 to 23 hours. And it just goes on from there, including up to, you get 3 points for the center supervisor program, 3 points for the CTO program, or 5 points for the CMCP. And there is a maximum of 12 points in this category, so they make sure that you're not just getting all of your points from one area. You have to do a number of different things. If you hold any NINA office, both at the national or the state chapter level, that counts. I have not held office, so I don't get any points there, but I have been on the Future Think Committee, and I need to add 2024 and 2025 on here because I'm still on the Future Think Committee. And you get 2 per committee per year for a maximum of 12. Participation in NINA industry collaboration event, that's for vendors, so that wouldn't really apply to you, but that's sort of a technical interoperability event that NINA holds. Sitting on a national, regional, state, or provincial or local emergency telephone services telecommunications board. So if you have board members for your 911 authority who want to get an ENP, they could actually count their service on that 911 authority board towards their ENP recertification. The new 911 Services Enterprise Board that we now have in Colorado, all 5 of those board members could use this for their ENP certifications. Publishing articles. Only the really cool people like Jennifer publish articles in magazines, but if you do publish an article in that's 911 related, it has to be a public safety related magazine. If you publish any article, each one is worth 4 points, and you can do that 3 times. Giving presentations on 911, you can see I filled that out pretty darn quick too, because I give a lot of presentations for a maximum of 8 points. So I won't go through the rest of this, but it gives you an idea of how many different ways you can earn points, which is why it's so easy to do. You just have to document it. And if you wait until the end of the 4 years, it's really difficult. Go back to this screen.
I have a question that you may not be able to answer, but I'll ask it anyway.
Ooh, a challenge.
So I already sent in my application and I put my points on there. But do you think from now until when I take the July test, I could put these points from now until July on the next recertification, or no?
No, the points start from the date of your certification.
Okay.
Yeah.
Bummer.
Yeah.
Okay, thanks.
So don't do anything until you get, no, I'm just kidding. But yeah. And then closing remarks, just some final tips. Don't psych yourself out. You can do this. Like I said, the passing score may depend on which questions are actually on your test. So it's not a set amount anymore, but back when I took it, it was 70%. I didn't find it that difficult. even though I hadn't been a manager of a 911 center for very long. You can do this. If you've been working in a 911 center for a number of years, there's a lot you learn by osmosis and you just haven't realized it, let alone what you learn through studying the study guide and reviewing these ENP study sessions. Again, use the multiple choice format to your benefit. They really, I mean, multiple choice, they narrow it down for you. You've got 4 options there. If you know that 2 or 3 of them are not correct, then the remaining one must be correct. If you narrow it down to 2, you at least have a 50-50 chance. Get a good night's sleep the night before. I know that sounds very trite, but it's always good. You don't want to be going in there sleepy. You're going to be sitting in silence for an hour and a half. So, sitting there, if you're sleepy at all, it's really going to hurt your ability to concentrate and focus on the questions. And don't do any last minute cramming. You don't know exactly what's going to be on the test, so cramming won't help. Trying to memorize things from the book won't help. The idea is that you have a mastery of the knowledge and can think through it once you get to actually read the questions. So memorizing is not going to really help, and cramming won't help. It's just going to stress you out, and it's going to make it harder for you to pull out the right answer when you're looking at the questions. So a long study period over the course of days or weeks before you take the test is a lot better than staying up till 3 in the morning before you take the test trying to memorize things in the book. You're not going to do very well if you try to do that. And then I just have any other tips with a question mark here. Does anybody else have any other tips they would like to provide for taking, just general test taking tips or tips specific to the ENP exam?
This is Jennifer. I would just like to say that I was absolutely terrified before I took my test. In fact, I was ready to back out, and I was encouraged by someone to just go ahead and take it, because the worst thing that can happen is if you fail, you get to take it again. So, and then you'll be informed about it. There's also practice tests on Nina's website that you can take. Yes. So if you're terrified like I was, I managed to pass. You guys are going to be great. You're going to pass as well because you've gone through study groups. So the first bullet point I would just like to stress, don't psych yourself out. You can do this.
Let me pull up the Nina ENP page. And can I say there were no study group sessions when I took it 20 years ago. There was a study guide, but I didn't know about it. So I basically just went in, I just went in cold and took it. I'm not saying that to brag. I'm just saying that if you've worked in a 911 center for a few years, your chances of knowing enough to pass the test are pretty high, especially if you do take advantage of those other resources like these study sessions and the study guide. And the practice test, I think, is a really good idea. This talks about the things you have to do to be eligible. Here's the exam schedule. They've got it broken out by quarter, so we've got exam dates over periods now, whereas they used to have specific dates for each test. The application procedure. Here's the fees. So it is a little pricey for some people, but hopefully this is something that your local agency will see the benefit of and will help fund for you, so you don't have to fund it yourself. And here are ENP exam materials and resources. So these are the things you would want to look at so you've got the study guide. Here's the practice test that Jennifer was talking about. It's a 50-question practice test, so it's about a third as long as the full test. ENP study groups. Is ours listed in here? We probably should have told them that about our group. Oops.
Isn't it right there?
Oh, there it is. Yeah, here it is. Yeah, cool. But, you know, our study group is the best, but other study groups will approach topics in different ways. So it would not necessarily hurt you to reach out and, you know, maybe check in with some of these other study groups that are in here. And then you can tell us that ours was the best. There's a podcast, which didn't exist back when I took it. And then there's a place to ask questions. So if you have any questions about the exam or what you need to do to, you know, how you need to be prepared when you come to take the test, you could email them here. Does anybody have any questions? Any concerns? Anybody need a pep talk? Jennifer's real good at those.
Give them out like candy.
I mean, I'll take a pep talk.
You got this, Candace.
Thanks.
No, in all seriousness, I really was terrified. And if I can do it, you guys can do it. Just review your material, and honestly, the best motivator is to go ahead and register for an exam period time, because then you have a deadline, which sounds terrifying, but also can be a great motivator. And reach out. You know, you've got a lot of resources here. Daryl and myself and Connie and Michael are all, and Jody too, are all happy to answer any questions you have. Any one of us would sit down and do a private study session with you to help you with areas you feel like you need more help in. It's just such a great community, and really any ENP you can find on Nina's list would be happy to help you. So if one of us doesn't explain it in a way that's clear, then reach out to the almost 2,000 EMPs that we have, because we've all been through it. Yeah. But by the end of the year, all three of you guys are going to be ENPs as well, because you got this.
That's right.
You know, I do have a question. Is this specific to Colorado? And then do other states have ENP certifications?
No, the ENP certification is kind of a global certification, so it's not specific to Colorado. It's national, and I think they do adjust the test depending on whether you're in the U.S. or Canada, because they have Canadian topics in the ENP study guide as well. But it is a national certification.
So when you go to the NINA conference, they always have a big wall with all the ENP names on it.
Oh, wow.
Yep. And there's EMPs in other countries too. So it's not even just a US thing.
Awesome. Thanks.
Mm-hmm. But think about that, all the thousands and thousands and thousands of people working in emergency communications all around the world, there's only 2,000 or so ENPs. So, you know, getting it really shows, I think, that you are dedicated to your profession. A lot of people could get it if they took it, but they just don't. But doing it shows that you want to demonstrate your knowledge and your skills and signal to other people that you are a accomplished professional in your field.
And there are a lot of supervisory and higher level jobs in 911 that look specifically for ENPs, or sometimes even make that a requirement.
Yeah, at the very least, a lot of job postings will say ENP preferred. Any other questions? You guys are probably tired of my old stories, but when I took it, it was also in Corpus Christi, Texas. That's where I took it. And it was in 2005, right before Hurricane Rita was bearing down on the city. And the humidity was 115%. So we're in there taking the test, and there's like water dripping down the walls from condensation. So that was fun. If I can pass it under those circumstances, you can definitely pass it.
So I
All right.
missed the deadline for the spring one. Do you think I'm gonna have a problem waiting till July?
Well,
No?
it depends on how anxious you are to take it.
Okay.
I mean, they do, so they've got four periods per year. Let me pull that back up. If I remember where it is in here.
I missed it too, so we'll just have a little bit of extra study time now.
That's true, I guess.
ENP exam. Let me share my screen again. So where were the time periods? Yeah, so if you missed, so yeah, the application deadline was March 7th. So if you haven't applied yet for the spring, then your next option will be to apply for the July. When? Yeah. And, I would say sooner better than later. I mean, you guys have been, I think everybody on here has been attending these sessions, so this information is fresh in your mind. It's not going to completely disappear by July. The longer you wait, though, the more you might have to refresh on the material before you take the test. And the longer you wait, the more likely you are to say, you know what, I haven't done it. I can do that later. I'll do that next year. And then next year comes, you go, well, I can do that next year. Sooner's better. Just bite the bullet and do it.
But the way I'm
Actually-
reading it, as soon as, even if we did apply now, with the deadline May 30th, the exam dates won't be until July. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay.
But if you want to take it in July, you have to apply
Right.
before May 30th.
Yeah.
Yep.
I just want you to know I'm going to come and check with all of you and see if you've registered, just because I know that you're motivated and I don't want you to psych yourself out. So be prepared for me to check in with you later this year.
And that doesn't sound ominous at all.
I know, but I really needed a kick in the butt. So if you're like me, then I do it out of love.
I did it honestly because I was a brand new 911 center manager and I had a lot of imposter syndrome. And I thought, if I go get this certification, it will at least demonstrate to myself that I know what I'm doing. And I'll tell you that, I still have imposter syndrome, but it did help build that confidence in me. If I felt like I didn't know what I was doing, it's like, you know what? I do know what I'm doing. There's always more to learn, and there's always ways you can do things better, but I'm not a complete idiot. I'm not completely ignorant on how this stuff works, because I have a certificate on my wall that proves that I know at least the baseline of what I'm doing here. So I think it can really be a confidence booster to get it, which may also spur you to, continue your career in different ways.
That's good advice. Thanks, Daryl.
Yep.
I
So
agree. This was a really motivating session. So thank you. I am going to set it as a goal to register for the July exam. So
excellent.
say a little prayer.
And Jennifer will make sure you do. Based on what she said earlier, she might be waiting outside your office watching.
Wow, I didn't mean it as a threat.
Whatever it takes,
That's right. All right. Well, with that, I will let you all go. Hope you have a good rest of your evening. And again, do not hesitate at all to contact any of us if you have any questions, or if you're going through the study guide and something just does not make sense. We're happy to help walk you through any of it.
Thank you.
Good luck, everybody.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you so much.
Bye.